So I have Congressman Doug Lamborn here from Colorado. Thank you so much for joining me, Congressman. I'm really excited to have you because I want to talk about something really important that's happened in the last few weeks and that you've been really active on, and that is with San Francisco State University hosting a terrorist, a Palestinian terrorist at their university for an online event. Now, fortunately, the event was kind of a failure because Zoom ended up not hosting it. It was online because of COVID, like many events that are happening right now. And Zoom was set to host the event, and they said, we are not hosting this. San Francisco State sought other platforms, YouTube, Facebook. The event was shortly cut off after it started, but it was still planned to go through. And I believe your concern here, you've written a letter. You've written to the Department of Education, the Department of Treasury. You've also written to FBI Director Chris Wray, and you've written to Attorney General William Barr most recently in a letter last week. And you're urging them to look into this. Now, first of all, have you heard back from any of these members of the U.S. government, of the administration?
No, not yet. And we feel like we're making our point, even if they're slow to get back to us. We want San Francisco State University or anyone else thinking of doing the same kind of thing to know that we're going to hold their feet to the fire if they try to host known terrorists. And frankly, just in an attempt to, as I see it, to indoctrinate our youth, our young men and women who are in college, who really, I don't think, need to be hearing from terrorists.
Right. So that's really interesting because, you know, this university was able to basically go through with their plans here. This is a terrorist who hijacked planes and basically is being lauded as a feminist. What is your response to this? Because these are, you know, this is your constituents putting their taxpayer dollars towards universities. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. We know that. And actually, more often than not, conservative voices, pro-Israel voices, Jewish voices are totally censored on university campuses. So how do you reconcile this issue?
Jenny, let's give a little bit of background here. Lila Khaled, the terrorist who's in question, in 1969 and 1970, two different times tried to hijack Israel airliners. And in the second attempt, the second one of those, there was actually a gunfight that broke out on board during the attempt, and she had a hand grenade, tried to set it off and bring the plane down and kill everyone on board. That was unsuccessful, fortunately. But she is a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, I think still is. And that is a designated terrorist organization by the US and a number of other countries. So she is an unrepentant terrorist, and that's no exaggeration. So for San Francisco State University to host her for a Zoom conference, and San Francisco State University unfortunately has some radical professors who are fairly out there on the fringes of the hard left. And when it comes to anti-Israel activities like this, where a person is being hosted who wants to promulgate their views to our youth under the auspices of a publicly funded university, we think that there's some real problems involved. And one problem is that taxpayer dollars are going to this, and this is an activity that arguably aids and abets terrorists. And that is a violation of US law. So that's why I wrote Betsy DeVos. Other people were protesting as well. That's why I wrote Betsy DeVos. That's why I've written to Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin saying, hey, this is a violation of our taxpayer dollars and the funding there. And I've asked the FBI and I've asked the Attorney General to look into whether there are criminal violations on the part of San Francisco State University by violating what I see as a violation of the law. So whatever decision they come up with, I want these universities who have radical professors and are going to be doing this kind of activity to know that we're going to hold their feet to the fire. We're not going to let this kind of outrageous behavior go on.
So how exactly are you going to do that? Because in this case, this is, a Palestinian terrorist, someone who carried out the act, who was in prison in the UK, and who is designated PFLP. The US has designated that a terrorist organization. But what about those who don't have that proven affiliation, who haven't carried out attacks, but who are aiding and abetting in this, like you say, like the professors who you say could be implicated in this? How exactly do you hold those people accountable?
Well, some of it, I think, is educating the public and letting taxpayers and stakeholders at these various universities know what's going on, educate them to what the issues are so that they will be moved and motivated to contact the universities also. Universities, on the one hand, they say they want free speech, but on the other hand, they have a responsibility not to put out views that aid terrorism, that glorify terrorism, that could lead to more acts of violence, that could create anti-Semitism. These are activities that no legitimate university should want to be involved in. So we want the universities to know that they're being scrutinized and they need to exercise good judgment. We want the public to know that these things are going on so that if they have an influence over that university as a taxpayer or a former alumni or something like that, or a contributor in the past, to make their voices known. Policymakers, lawmakers at the state and federal level need to know this also. And then those who are in law enforcement, like the Attorney General and the FBI, they need to know about this as well, so that they know that there's a real problem here. There should be no glorification of terrorism.
Right. And I know you were a co-sponsor of the Taylor Force Act, and that's, the same kind of idea here, that it's pay for slay. I mean, they're congratulating and they're giving Layla Khaled a platform to continue to be famous for what she's done as a terrorist. And moreover, this university receives, I believe it's in 2019, has a $137.1 million endowment. The university has received plenty of federal funds, including in the CARES Act. Do you see any kind of action through threatening the funding there? Again, you emphasize that this is taxpayer dollars at work. How can you fix that problem?
Well, Jenny, I think having contacted and made this folks aware of this is our first step. Betsy DeVos, Mnuchin, Attorney General, and the Director of the FBI. I think that we're in good hands now with people being able to have the facts and to look at it. And Jenny, I was really happy also that Zoom refused to host this once they found out what was going on. Facebook refused to host it once they found out what was going on. And YouTube, it took them about 20 minutes into it, but they backed out as well. So I was glad that these very large and influential social media platforms stepped up as well. And because they sometimes take the easy way out and they say, no, we're not going to get involved. We're just going to let people do what they want. They saw that this was wrong. They saw that this was outrageous. And I'm glad that they took the right response as well.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, you mentioned the Taylor Force Act. I introduced that to address exactly what you mentioned, the pay for slay. No US dollars or anyone's dollars for that matter should be going to the Palestinian Authority so that they can turn around and reward terrorists who have been jailed for their attempts to kill, or maybe a successful killing, of Israelis. Taylor Force was an American. He wasn't Jewish or Israeli. He was an American veteran who was visiting Israel as part of his education, I believe at Vanderbilt. And he was killed by a terrorist who was on a killing spree. And this terrorist was killed. So now the PA is rewarding the family of that terrorist. And then we're not talking about a few dollars. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And that's money that really should be going to schools and hospitals and rebuilding society, because that's a very dysfunctional society in so many ways. So that is something that we need to hold their feet to the fire also. We can talk about that maybe on another occasion, steps we can take for the Palestinian Authority to not go down the wrong road there as well.